Well, good morning. It's time for the tactics meeting. In this episode, I'm talking to Mark Curtis about the planning section. We recorded this a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just now getting around to editing because I'm either busy or I'm lazy. I'm not really sure which one it is in this particular context, but it was a really good conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. So we're
Well,
going to talk about planning,
I have a
right?
quiz for you if you're ready.
I'm ready. Fire
Let
away.
me see if I can
Do I
steal.
have to have a button? Do I need a button to be ready?
It's just us. So I think.
Okay.
Let me see if. Can you see my screen?
Yep, yep. Planning quotes. I love it.
All right.
I get my glasses on.
All right.
There.
It's weird because I have three screens and it's showing that my inbox is showing, but it's not. Okay. All right. Planning quotes. Here's your first question. So there's a little historical. Do you remember somebody named Tammy Jo Schultz?
Oh no, this name is not familiar to me.
Oh, all right. I'll give you a clue.
Failed already? I failed already.
No. It's a three-parter. All right. Does this look familiar to you? And
That
for the
looks
for, for the audience, what we're looking at is
that
a
looks like the
engine.
engine on a Boeing 737.
Yeah, and you can get the brand of the airplane,
I see
the
it. Southwest, yep, see it. Yep.
Southwest. You're looking at a open, for lack of a better phrase, engine. NTSB officers are looking into the engine. What's missing?
The cowling.
The cowling. So, do you remember an incident in which the cowling disconnected from the engine?
No, that does not ring a bell.
So it happened about 10 years ago. So Tammy Jo was the pilot. She is a former Navy aviator, and they were in air when the cowling came off and shot into the actual body of the airplane and sucked somebody out. And then she then had to, with her co-pilot, make an emergency landing, saving everybody else on board the the airplane. So she was able to do that. You know, you have the immediate decompression. You have to get to a certain the face masks are coming down. So she had to focus. She had to figure out what was going to happen. But one of the things from this particular incident, again, it's unfortunate that a mom lost her life, but the captain was able to save everybody else on board. When I asked her, "Hey, what's your thought process?" Because remember, you and I have been talking about aviation for a long time in terms of emergency response. They've got books and books and books that they have to have on their pads now, but they used to have to walk around with their books as they were going from flight to flight to flight. They have their checklists and they have more checklists and they have a secure cockpit. They have all these things that are in place. And she said this: as long as you have altitude and ideas, you're okay. I was like, all right, well, that sounds pretty familiar for something else to happen to just a couple of years afterwards. So here comes your second one. So after Tammy Jo, you've got another one, Chelsea Sullenberger.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this was the Miracle on the Hudson.
That's it. So that's Sully. Nobody calls him Chelsea for some reason, but Sully. Sully had a better quote. All right. Everything is unprecedented until it happens the first time.
Yeah,
I
well,
love it.
that's right.
Again, we're aiming towards the planning discussion. All right.
Well, it's like that, I hear from people all the time, oh, that'll never happen. The,
That
the minute
that's
somebody tells me, well, that could never happen, it's like, well, we better figure out how to manage that because that's what I'm going to get called for tomorrow night. I mean, never say never.
that's it. It's we can have all the best plans, all the best drills, all the best exercises in the entire universe. The world's going to throw something else at us. Simple as that. Would you have thought 10 years ago or 14 years ago, I think, when the first of the Priuses came out? So here we got a electric vehicle. They're driving around. They build their own energy. The Prius, right? Would you imagine that here we are in 2025, 2026, talking about ship fires due to the transport of other types of battery or EV vehicles or giant battery packs? I don't think we would have.
No, no, it's really it's really an unexpected kind of side consequence. And, these EV batteries, as we've talked about many times now, are such a thing. I mean, I won't buy one of those electric scooters like out of Costco and put it in my house. I don't know who built that battery. I don't know about its charging system. I've watched I watched this one YouTube video. Heck, you might have even been the one to send it to me. I don't recall, where it was taken from a Ring doorbell, looking across the street at an apartment building, and you see a little flash of light in the window, and within 30 seconds, that apartment is fully engulfed in fire. And it was an electric scooter that was plugged in, left charging, and away it went. And that's not to say that leaving it on the charger was the cause, but you can't fight these fires, and I just won't have one in the house.
Oh God! Last year or the year before, a bridge, a ship's bridge wheelhouse. They had the radio in the charger, and it had its own thermal runaway and burned down the entire bridge.
I
Uh,
hadn't heard about that.
yeah, yeah. I'll try and grab that case study for you too, only
And that
because
and that
again,
that was just like a handheld radio.
yeah, one of the
And it
UHFs. Yeah. So
the thing mine's
keeping
not
things on
fireproof.
charge is becoming one of those things. Hey, what do you do once it's charged? Because I get an alert to my phone now that never got before, that my AirPods have been fully charged. So if I'm awake when that comes through, I walk over and I take them off the automatic charger, just because I'm getting super paranoid from all of these things. So, all right, final question.
Yep.
I think you might know this one. Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
Winston Churchill said a lot of things about planning. A lot. There's so many quotes out there about planning, but there's one that really sticks out. It says, I have found in my experience of war that plans are useless, but planning is invaluable.
I actually think that was Eisenhower's quote.
Well, the interweb says otherwise, and the interweb never lies.
It never lies. It never
Never
lies.
lies. It might be a version of that. That's all.
Yeah.
So, but the point is, I'll
Right.
stop sharing the screen. The
The
point is, oh wait, there was one more slide.
the plan is nothing. To plan is everything. Is another version of that quote, and I
Yes.
and I like it. I have a slide for that in one of my Haswapper class slide decks too.
I may have stolen that from you then. All right.
Possibly.
The final slide that I put together just this morning, and I was just working off cuff of having this conversation. What are the plans that are already written and required to be on board one of my vessels today? And this is not all of it, because there's also the approval letters and all sorts of other documentation. So we have to start with your international/state, because international refers to countries, state refers to countries in the IMO thought process. So you have your SOPEP or your SMPEP if you're an oil tanker, and that comes with the IMO MEPC list of contacts that gets updated 3 or 4 times a year. Then if you're going through the Panama Canal, there's a SOPEP index to that. You get into US waters, you need to have your NTVRP or your vessel response plan. And with that is the list of approved ports. With that is also the contact information for the US Coast Guard Captain of the Port Zone. If you're in the state of California, you can get that plan, or you can integrate it with the other two. But now you need a placard for that as well. So you've got a placard for the other one. Now you have a placard for California. You get up to Washington, you have a Washington State plan that you can own yourself and go through the approval process, or join WSMIC and get an umbrella plan. Oh, now we get a field guide and another placard. There we go. Alaska, you've got your state ODPCP, oil discharge prevention contingency plan. And then if you want to go somewhere in Alaska, such as Prince William Sound or Cook Inlet, there's plans for those two areas. One of them can combine with the state plan. And there's an ATB annex that goes with all of that. Also, on top of all of this, you have to have your agreements in place for Columbia River, parts of California, Guam, American Samoa, Eastern, Western Canada, and of course, China. So all of this is planning. All of this is, hey, we're going to go to this place, And all of this focuses on the capability of a vessel to cause an oil spill, whether it's grounding, collision, fire, or loss of containment through cargo operations, that sort of thing. Those are the things that we've been focused on since Open 90, since the Exxon Valdez. And it's created, how much paper do you think, if we printed those out these days? How much paper? That's one ship, by the way.
Right. It's like
All of that
16,
is on one ship.
it's like 16 binders. I mean, it is a lot of paper.
And what does the captain of that vessel actually need?
Oh, about 1 page of contact information.
That's that. I'm not saying that everything else is useless, but in the heat of the moment, it's intended. In the heat of the moment, they need to be notifying. They need to be getting the information out there. The crew are trained. They go through their monthly SOPEP drills. They know where the equipment is. They get familiarized on the equipment. They'll do the cleanup. They'll try and stop the spill. That's fine. They practice for that. But to say that out of those 16 binders, they're popping open the binder in the wheelhouse at the time, that's why there are placards. That's why there's the one-page contact list, or you're in a foreign country. Yeah, I do need the updated IMO MEPC because I'm going into Portugal. Okay, but I would have also had that about 2 weeks before I go to Portugal. I would have been talking to my port agent. My port agent would have been arranging a lot of those services for us. Uh, but yeah, no, it's tens of thousands of pages if you try and print out today. Luckily, a lot of them can be kept in electronic format these days. I think the reason has come to the response community in the sense that paper copies are required in certain areas based on history. For example, there are written copies in Valdez, Alaska. That is just part of the process up there.
Well, like at
As an
Washington, we used to be required to send 2 fully printed bound copies of the oil spill response plan to the Department of Ecology. You could also send them electronic version, and they wanted an electronic version, but they required the hard copies. They don't do that anymore. They
Yep.
no longer require the hard copy. But that also leads to a certain degree of data management, issues for where these things live, and is the master, the mate, um are they able to lay their hands on these things quickly going into the ship's computer system. I have enough trouble remembering where I stored last year's version of the Haswapper slide deck because I want to modify it, like where file
Um,
management continues to be a thing.
And again, that is just a truncated list. The other things required to be on board, again, electronically would be, say, the SERV's technical manual, which is a list of all of their equipment, which gets updated routinely as well. It's one of these things where there's not really a month where another update isn't coming across that has to be distributed to the vessels, and different vessels get different things. And uh, when 90% is for the shoreside responders. 90, but it's the only place where they can get you is saying, hey, you've got a vessel. You're going to put all the stuff that you're going to do as a company in your vessel response plan. Even though they're not going to do it, you're going to do it. You get the organization together. You're getting your ICS together. ICS takes up about probably 40 or 50 pages in a good response plan because they want to document the different roles and responsibilities, which brings us to tactics and brings us to how do we do the things that are in there. And I want to ask you a lot of questions about what it's like being a planning section chief.
Yeah, fire away.
All right, who's more powerful in your eyes, you, planning section chief, or incident commander?
Well, powerful is an interesting word. I think the planning section chief's role is without a doubt the hardest job in the room because you're trying to move this organization forward in an organized way. A good incident commander um, needs to be looking outside of the organization. They are dealing with regulators, with stakeholders, with elected officials. They need to have a really strong planning section chief and operations section chief that are looking inward. And you have to trust those people, because if you're the incident commander and you're doing planning or you're doing operations, then you're not doing your job. And it's a really hard thing for people who have strong operations backgrounds when they first come into the incident commander role, because I think here's a good quote for your slide deck. When you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And so, in the heat of battle, you run to your happy place, which might be talking about which boom strategies we're going to deploy, but that's not your job. At least if we've scaled up enough so that there's an ops section chief, it's not your job. But
So, what are some traits then of a planning section chief in your eyes?
well, planning section chief needs to be really well organized. Um, they need to be fearless, because you're going to tell people, including the incident commander, no, right? I mean, you're really the chief of staff for this response, and you've got to be driving things like an incident action plan forward. You're going to have people who are saying, well, we'll just stay in the 201 phase for a while. And the planning section chief's like, no, not doing it. We're moving forward here into this planning cycle. We're doing these things. Oh, we probably don't need to do this or that. Like, I took over as the planning section chief for an incident down in California, and I think I've talked about this incident in the past. I took over from a planning section chief. I won't say from who or what organization. And they're like, well, we've got an incident action plan, but we've been really doing ICS light. I'm like, well, what's ICS light? Um, and it turns out, they had never actually signed any of these IEPs that they supposedly created. And I've said it before and I'll say it again: an IEP without unified command signatures is just waste paper, right? And so in my mind, the planning section chief's job is to drive this process forward and to insist on crossing all of the T's and dotting all the I's. You talked about earlier, um, maintaining a history of a response. Well, it's the planning section chief's job, among others, to make sure that history don't not only exists, but it's complete, and that it accomplished all. It shows that you did all the things that your response plan said you were going to do. And I think it's really important to recognize that this response plan is not just a guide for how you're going to respond. This plan has been written to demonstrate to regulators like the United States Coast Guard, like the California OSPR, or ADEC in Alaska, how it is that you're going to respond that meet their regulatory requirements. It is, in essence, an extension of federal law. It says, I'm going to do this. And so if you don't do that in the heat of battle, and something goes wrong, you could have a really big problem. Um, and, and so it's the planning section chief's job, among many, to make sure that we're doing the things that we said we were going to do. That response plans are out on the tables in the command post, and if we're going to do something that deviates from the plan, then it better have uh, it better have a 204 as part of an IEP that has unified command signatures that said, "Hey, we're going to do this." And it's why I feel we have to move towards a signed IEP as soon as possible. I mean, I used to believe that staying in the 201 was easier, more flexible, that we should just stay in the 201 as long as possible, because we don't want to go through the hassle of creating an IEP. But there are some really good reasons to do so, and not the least of which is responder immunity. Open 90 says that, and immunity isn't the word that's used, but that says that responders have some protection from prosecution for acts taken during response other than acts that are grossly negligent, provided that you are responding at the direction of the president. In this case, the president means the delegated authority given to the federal on-scene coordinator. And so by signing an incident action plan that says, hey, this plan, we've developed a plan, this is what we're going to do. And hey, I, the federal on-scene coordinator, I agree with these actions, right? I, the state on-scene coordinator, I agree with these actions. Those signatures put responder immunity in place. And no one should want to move forward in response without that immunity in place.
But you can't do it by yourself. Let's be honest.
No, no, you
All
can't.
right. So you need to put together a planning section. Which units within the planning section are your absolute, I need, there is no question, I need this position filled because A, I can't do it by myself. So there's a number that are listed in ICS, but as we know, depends on the how big this, how scaled up this thing is. What are the positions that you absolutely ride or die? This is it. These are the ones I absolutely need specifically in the planning section.
Yeah, it's a great question. And my first answer might not seem super intuitive, but it's the documentation unit leader. DOCL is the one. I've responded to a number of incidents as the planning section chief, where the only other position in planning that I staffed was DOCL, and it's for the very reasons that you stated earlier. We have to maintain this historical record. We need to make sure that these plans are signed, that they're consistent, that they meet all of the requirements. I mean, I can live without, depending on how big the incident is, I can live without a resource unit leader for a while. I can live without a situation unit leader for a while. But if we don't start off with documentation on the right foot, we just never catch up again. And so that's for me the number one position after the planning section chief.
What's your thoughts on who do you want to have on your team, but do not actually need to be in your incident command post because they're so good at what they do that they can remote in? Because I know you run your virtual incident command post. I run my virtual incident command post. Um, I have a favorite group that is nothing but paperwork, but they're doing it for a very good reason because the plan requires that these specific things need to be done. But I'm interested. I'll also delve into a different section with my answer. But for you, who can work from home essentially and provide, or from their office, and provide you the same level of support rather than having to fly across the country or up into the Klondike in order to support you?
Yeah, that's also a great question. And I think most of the finance section can be remote. A good chunk of the logistics section can be remote. I think you need a finance section chief and a logistics section chief in the room, and you may need some deputies in the room. But I think for the most part, the finance section people are better off in their offices in Houston or Jacksonville with their 3 monitors, right? And their coffee pot and their high-speed internet connection that's not competing uh, for bandwidth with everybody else that's in the command post. I certainly don't need all of those people taking up the limited hotel room space that might be available in these locations. So there's a core team that need to be present on the ground, by day 2 or day 3 to manage this, that need to participate in the IP development and be able to attend these meetings. You might be able to deal with a finance section chief that is completely remote, provided that you staff a position in planning that is going to manage all of the online meetings. And I think that's a new position that we
Yeah.
just need to staff. It's the person who is going to make sure that all the meetings are open, that all the links have gone out, um, that the chat feature is turned on, that you're able, all those things are set up and ready to run. When I show up at the command post, I bring a conference owl with me. I bring a second laptop, the sole purpose of which is to be um, the machine that displays the meeting in the command post. Um, and I really learned this on the Genius Star 11 incident. I set up one of my first meetings, and I, hooked my laptop to the projector and started the meeting. But what it meant is that as the as the host computer, the people in the command post didn't see the other participants. So the machine that's logged in that's displaying the meeting needs to be a guest so that all the people are in there. And then you need a separate machine that is the host. And that separate machine actually needs a couple of displays. So not only do I show up with that extra computer to do that, but there are two portable monitors in that Pelican case that I can connect to my laptop so that I have the slides that I'm sharing, and I have, the personnel roster so I can mute people, kick people out of the meeting, whatever, right? So you can manage the meeting. And there really shouldn't be the planning section chief. This was a relatively small command post and I did it myself. But this is the kind of position that, we need to now staff in planning, this meeting technical expert that's running these meetings.
1,000%. I've got for the first time, I'd say in my professional life, and granted, I'm not that old, but I got 25 years in professional maritime experience.
Yeah, you don't have
In,
any gray yet, do you? No gray.
that's why I shave.
Yeah.
It comes in gray. But one of the things that I'm very blessed with at the current company, and you met Charles in a recent episode, is probably the best IT team I've ever worked with, ever professionally. It's not the, hey, please call the line, we'll get your work order, we'll get it fixed. No, we got a guy sitting in our office that comes over to your desk right away and says, okay, what's going on? And it's usually fixed within 5 seconds. And it's usually in my line user error. uh, but this is probably the most user friendly IT team I've ever worked with ever. I have really good IT people, some of them in my family. Have they been helpful? Maybe. But in this case, I would say having somebody that understands how meeting, to your point, how the permissions is a big part of it now. The version of Teams that we use does not allow third parties to see the chat. But that's what training is for. Because when you go into our version of it, it's actually the conversation is there, not the chat feature, if that makes sense. The
Yeah.
post is the chat. But for people that don't know that and they say, oh, well, the chat button's not there, I can't use it. I say, go to the post button because it's the same thing. It's just in a larger format. But prior to any of our drills or exercises, I have to get all those third party people together, put them through training, record the training for those that couldn't attend, and then put the training into the virtual incident command post that when they show up and they say, oh, I don't have chat, I can say, oh, you can go take training then. It's mean, but in reality, that's what happens is not everybody's up to speed on the technology that we are going to be using that day. And maybe we have time for that person to learn a little bit on their own. Go watch this video. It's in this channel. Go check it out. It'll teach you what you need to know. You can practice over here with this person, and then you can join us in the command post.
Yeah, that's
Um,
a really good point. Creating within that team's environment, a training channel where you can
Oh, absolutely.
put all those things. And I also create an IT support channel,
Same. Yep.
that we have somebody, a Teams administrator, somebody who has administrative rights, or as close as we can get to that, for Teams to be in there to help people, um, to create a or provide an email address for people that they can get help to log in. You know I've
Well,
actually created a
yeah,
whole instruction. I have a series of emails that I can send to people to help them log in. It's like, delete your cache. These, this,
or they
instruction.
haven't swapped over to your environment in the
Yep.
first place, and they're in the web version, and you're like, no, 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 you go to the top right, click on your picture, and drop down to ours, and little things like that. Absolutely. Even using the at, like we create at help,
Yeah. Right.
and it signals this person, hey, oh, this lit up for me. Oh, let me go see what this at help is all about. But you need somebody that knows how that works. And not everybody is at the same stage when we're leveraging new platforms. And we're also not always working the same platform. And you were just talking about that yourself. Maybe you've got one platform for communications, whether it be Zoom or Teams. I've used both for incident command post. And then where are you capturing all your ICS forms? Where is your common operating picture? Where is your resource requests? You might be in 3 or 4 different programs, and you may need that IT help to be a person from each of those, the specialist for each of those platforms, because I guarantee nobody has 100% of that knowledge. You
Right.
might need 2 or 3 or even 4 people to manage that box or that channel in your virtual incident command post. And I like how we always come full circle to that topic.
Yeah. Virtual command post. Yeah. Right after right after COVID kind of ended, everybody wanted to talk about, is the virtual command post dead, or is the virtual command post here to stay, or what about the virtual command post? And in a way, I'm kind of tired of talking about it, because you know it's always going to be hybrid. There are always going to be people who are going to remote in. As the planning section chief, when you walk in, you must plan that these meetings are going to have remote participants. And that means that you need to proceed in a format that I call digital first, which means that you need to put together your meeting materials in such a way that you're focused on the experience of the remote participant. What you can't do is, put up hard copies in the meeting room that the remote participants can't see. And it's why I've moved towards creating slide decks to manage all the meetings. I have my 201 slide deck, my initial UC meeting slide deck, as templates, so that I can go in and update them before the meeting. But I want to put them up on a shared screen, again with a separate computer that is a guest, so that I'm presenting the same information to the people who are online as I'm presenting in the room. And it's a requirement. It's just not optional anymore.
And you mentioned your meeting owl. Obviously, me being your younger brother, I also went out and bought the meeting owl, and I've used it a couple of times. That value added is right there because otherwise you get a plug-in camera. Otherwise, you're just looking at the person and you're not seeing what's happening in the room itself. So what I used to do is I had a separate camera and point it towards the conversation. And that way it wouldn't be me, it would be that. But to be able to put the owl in a corner or in the middle, wherever it needs to go, so that it catches all the conversation. It's got the speaker, it's got the microphone, but it's got the 360 camera, which is kind of the biggest part. In a smaller setting, you can put it at the end of the table, that sort of thing. The one thing I'm going to warn you, we did an officers conference and we had the former director of the NTSB Her name is Tracy Morell. She used to actually be my DPA back in the day, and she was a deck officer. She's phenomenal. And I said, "Oh, can you teach incident investigation and root cause analysis and corrective action?" She said, "Absolutely." And I said, "All right, well, we're going to be in Florida on these dates." "Oh, I'm in London." "Well, can you come?" She said, "No, no, 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 I can't come." I said, "All right, well, what I'll do is I'll set up the meeting owl. I've got this IT team that have a sound system, lighting board. They had everything, but I'll set this up and you'll be able to see the audience." Because they had set up these professional speaker systems, the speakers took all of the attention of the meeting owl. So while somebody's talking out in the audience asking a question, the noise of their conversation is actually coming from the speakers at the front of the stage. So the owl would focus on the stage where nobody was standing for the entire time. So being aware of where your owl is going to look is kind of important. Uh, I missed that point when I set it up. I was like, oh man, I should have turned off those speakers.
Well, I learned something new not that long ago. I don't know how to do it, but there is an HTML control panel for the owl. You can log into the owl and you can adjust its camera
Oh,
angle. You can tell it, hey, I only want you to focus on this 180 degrees. I don't know how to do it.
I didn't know how to do that yet.
I
I'll
should
learn.
learn to do it,
Yeah.
but it can be done. And so
You
that's half
shouldn't
the
do things
battle.
like you shouldn't do things like that on the fly like I did. Needless to say, Tracy showed up for the next two conferences in person, and just absolutely amazing presentation, getting into literally the causes of some of the most common incidents that we see out there. So
Actually, that sounds like a really great presentation.
I would highly recommend not
Maybe
only
maybe
bringing
we could
her
get her on
on.
the podcast.
Yeah, that I have her phone number.
Oh, all right. Well, let's do that.
But and since we're talking about that, I found out that my alma mater, the Massachusetts Maritime Academy, has an emergency response major now.
Oh,
So
cool.
I went there. They had maritime safety, environmental protection. They had an oil spill simulator that got me interested in this stuff. Again, I graduated 25 years ago. And recently, I've been able to connect with a lot of people from the school. And somebody said, "Well, do you want a cadet that, to be an intern for emergency response?" I'm like, "Oh, I can't teach them everything." Like, no, that's their major. Like, we currently have maritime cadets coming out of the academies with ICS training, with emergency response. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that'd be cool. So another person we might want to consider the head of that department, or some of the ones that are entering the field with that degree, to understand what they're coming out with based on our last conversation, which is the response community is not appearing to get younger, but there is a lot of energy and effort being put into that next generation to say, okay, this is important right now, but the types of emergencies are different.
Yeah. No, I think that'd be great. I would love to have somebody from that department. I'd like to know, what the motivation was for creating the major. I mean, they don't do that kind of thing lightly. It's a big investment to create a whole new educational track. And that would be an interesting part of the conversation, what they're actually teaching them, a good part of the conversation, especially as we see, you know, FEMA sort of fading away. At least it appears to be. Although I must say that um, FEMA appeared to do a really great job with the flooding here in Washington before there was a federal declaration. Um, they had stood up their facility in Bothell and were beginning to do the things that they could do in anticipation of a federal Stafford Act declaration. Um, and so that part is pretty cool. But like we talked about, in the earlier episode we recorded a couple weeks ago that will come out tomorrow. Um, the training that's available from FEMA is becoming less available. And we're going to have to look at how we go about training people, but that's a topic for another day.
And making it as relevant as possible. And to answer your question, I don't know if you asked it or I made it up in my head. Why would they go down that route of creating emergency response? There were two specific incidents that they weighed in on. One was the overturning of the Costa Concordia. They went and they talked to the admiral of the academy at the time, who, was working on public record information, did not have inside information to understand how it happened in the first place, and what could have led to it. There was a lot of speculation prior to uh, learning what Captain Scatino had actually done over on the Costa Concordia off the coast of Italy. And the second incident was, so that's one type of major disaster that they said, oh, we need to be able to prepare people for that. So that's part. And how do you respond to that as, not the crew, but as a company or as, a political organization such as the Italian government. And the second incident was Captain Phillips. Captain Phillips is a graduate of the academy, and ironically enough, the chief mate on board was the son of the training ship captain, who was a class behind me at the academy. He was one of the crew members who was the chief mate on board the Maersk Alabama when it happened. So there was a lot of publicity and press around, hey, wait a second, we didn't plan on piracy in 2000 and whatever. Again, going back to our initial conversation, it's the stuff that we're not 100% trained in on that's going to come and grab us. So those two very specific events probably, bear in mind, I had already left the academy, I was already out in the market, were pretty influential on deciding to go down that route. But I would like to have that conversation and hear from the team over there to understand if that's where it came from, or is there more, and what are they teaching these kids today?
Right. Well, that's why, we at the Washington State Maritime Cooperative have been really focused lately on response to ship fires as opposed to doing the same oil spill drill we've been doing for 20 years. We've had two ship fires in the port of Tacoma in the last 5 years, and I've responded to three if you can include those two plus the Genius Star 11 in Alaska. And we have this emerging threat that you already brought up of uh, lithium-ion batteries and EV vehicles. We see that Mats in transportation has already said we're no longer going to carry EVs on our ships. You want to get your Tesla out to Hawaii, you're going to have to send it on a barge or do something else. We're not taking it because they feel like it's that big a risk. Washington State ferries say they won't transport damaged EVs on board the ferries. I'm not sure how one actually other than it arriving on a trailer or something. I don't know what that means, but
If it's being towed, it's pretty good idea yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um, and so, these are the things, we're required to activate our plan for incidents that represent a significant threat of pollution. And that significant threat, as outlined by the Coast Guard, includes fires, flooding, groundings, collisions, elisions. And so when you start your drill every year with already oil in the water, you miss all of those other things, right? What we need to do is, start with the grounding where we're, activating tugs, we're activating the salvage marine firefighting contractor, we're doing these other things prior to oil actually being in the water. And I think we're doing ourselves a disservice when we start our drills by saying, well, we don't care how the oil got in the water. We're just, we're going to say there's 50,000 barrels of oil in the water and that the vessel's aground. And we don't really care about the vessel. All we care about is mobilizing skimming resources and, wildlife rehab. And so you practice these, these couple of things and you're not training your on-call incident commanders, your QIs, for the things that come before that, right?
Let's say maybe in Georgia, a car carrier turns over in the harbor. Maybe up in Baltimore, you hit a bridge and people unfortunately perish. You're out in the North Sea and your oil tanker gets hit by an incoming container ship. Yeah, no, emergency management has shifted, and it's good. It means that, as we talked about previously, the design of ships have improved. The rules and the regulations have improved and are much more stringent. The training of mariners is much more stringent depending on what qualifications they need to be on board those vessels. You can't just walk on board an oil tanker saying, hey, listen, I used to run a tug. There's other requirements that are now in place that maybe weren't there. I'm almost going to date myself 38 years ago. You gotta roll with the times, and I think we are starting to really feel that with all of the large scale disasters that are happening. Not to mention geopolitical messes that are occurring on a routine basis these days. The Suez Canal getting blocked, the Houthi rebels shooting missiles at tankers and cargo ships and that sort of thing. Oh, and piracy's back in multiple locations. The Straits of Malacca, the east coast of Africa. It's becoming a fun work environment yet again.
Well, Fairwater should outfit a privateer.
I cannot speak to any of the tactics that are being taken by a private industry company at this time.
Like, I want to be a privateer captain. I'm reading a book called French Prize, and it's just taking place right before the kickoff of the War of 1812, and they're outfitting one of the merchant vessels. They put 6 4-pounders on
Bring
board.
cannons back. Absolutely, let's bring cannons
Let's
back.
bring cannons back, man. Little a letter of marque, and we'll go out and do some pirate hunting. Right? Escort or create a private escort. That'd be pretty cool.
There are plenty of companies right now that are making money off that, especially going through the Red Sea and areas like that that already exist.
Didn't I
They're
read 2 or 3 years ago that I don't know what they call themselves now? It was Blackwater, right? And now it's something else. I don't remember.
well, you get companies not so embroiled with a drama like UKMTO and those sorts of organizations that are providing real time updates as to what's happening, as well as advice on where to avoid getting off the coast of Mogadishu, that sort of thing. So they exist. If you can get into them, oof, they're doing quite well given the current geospectrum.
That'd be interesting to look at. I'd be interested in how they're adopting AI and updated surveillance techniques to provide that real-time data. That would just be cool to see the technology that's being deployed.
It's that, but it's also 24/7 command post. They
Yeah.
they have people that are literally just getting, information, actual human intelligence still, and signal intelligence, coming across the various wires as to, hey, we have report of a vessel, whether it's a dhow or a container ship or a cargo ship. This vessel has been struck. We don't have the name of the vessel. We don't have details, but avoid the area kind of thing. Or approached by 7 small craft, evasive maneuver. So that information comes in almost daily. Almost daily, there is something going on in that region.
Did you
But
see
it's
the
not
pic?
limited to that region either. Venezuela seems to be very popular this week.
Yeah, it does seem to be popular this week. Did you see the picture of the container ship, like a 300-foot container ship in China, out outfitted with vertical missile launchers coming out of container form factors?
No, are you sure that wasn't AI generated?
I'm pretty sure because it was detailed in the What's Going On in Shipping podcast, and he's pretty good. And I did
Reminds me of the
follow it
Clive
up a little
Cussler
bit.
novel.
It does. I mean, it's yeah, it's
Well, good on them,
it's wackadoo.
Yep.
Uh, What's your next question? Planning question.
Oh, all right. Well, I need to wrap it up soon. So planning section chief, planning section, environmental unit.
Oh yeah.
What 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 do you assign them to first?
Well, in at least in Washington, the Northwest Area Contingency Plan specifies that the environmental unit leader will come from a trustee agency, and generally that's the Department of Ecology. Um, and the first thing that they do is produce resources at risk so that we can move off of the um, pre-planned deployments from the GRPs to a more targeted protective deployment regime, one that might include um, uh, archaeological sites that aren't publicly listed and that kind of thing. So we're looking for the environmental unit to do that right away. We're looking for the environmental unit to begin to stand up for scat. What I do is bring in, since ecology is going to run the unit, I bring in a co-lead. Generally, I look to Polaris Applied Sciences to find someone so that I have a responsible party representative sitting right next to the unit leader, and I like to designate them as a co-leader rather than a deputy. I want it to be clear that this is a partnership, not um, not that we're going to step out of the way of the environmental unit, because so many things end up getting run out of their scat, and um, sometimes Washington likes to run community air monitoring out of the environmental unit rather than out of safety. So there's a lot of things going on there. So I think getting that co-lead in there. I also like to get a, a NERDA liaison in there pretty quickly to begin to put together a baseline so that we're not behind the curve when NERDA stands up. Natural resource damage assessment kind of stands up in parallel to the response. So I feel that it's my responsibility in supporting the responsible party, to make sure that we start to put that in place as quickly as we can.
I think you just brought up probably the most important thing that I have to remind people is acronyms. We use so many acronyms in this environment. Shoreline cleanup and assessment, all of these things, we shorten them, and then I have to, sit down and write. I wrote a dictionary for my own team where I'm like, okay, if they use this phrase, don't giggle. If they use this phrase, this is what this means. And it's familiarity with the language that's being spoken.
Oh, I
Uh,
do. That's
I
absolutely
do.
right. And for those
Yeah,
who want to know more about scat, there is a podcast that I did with Ed Owens, who's like the godfather of shoreline cleanup assessment techniques. You can go look at that podcast. I did a
he's actually
podcast.
doing. He's doing that for my company in May,
Oh, cool.
up in Valdez. He's going to be the one that teaches. It's going to be a half day classroom, and then during the exercise, we'll do a field deployment under his direction for all the various types and things that come with it, such as decontamination. Once you're out in the field, and how do you get back in? How do you get out of the red zone?
So I recall in that podcast, he actually talked about how they were using scat dogs they were training to sniff oil, who can come along on what looks
On
like
a
a clean
boat
beach, right?
or from the boat.
Right, right,
They were
exactly.
smelling it from the water surface. That was crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts. So that was a really good episode. And if you want to know more about natural resource damage assessment, I did a great episode with Greg Challenger from Polaris Applied Scientists, talking about NERDA, which is really, that podcast is what set me on a path to, make sure that I have a NERDA liaison. Honestly, prior to doing that podcast episode, I didn't know what I didn't know. So
I learn every time we do this.
every time. All right. Closing thoughts before you go and walk the dog in the beautiful 70-degree weather there in Fort Lauderdale.
No, just thank you. I really appreciate these opportunities. As I said, I learn every single time we talk.
I love doing these Sunday morning with coffee. This is a great time to do it. Well, thank you, Mark Curtis from Fairwater and board president for Washington State Maritime Cooperative. We'll talk to you soon. Later. This episode of the Tactics Meeting is brought to you in part by Gallagher Marine Systems. Gallagher Marine Systems is the industry's most comprehensive source of full-service, in-depth compliance support. And by the Washington State Maritime Cooperative, the only non-profit umbrella plan holder dedicated to oil spill readiness for commercial vessels operating in Puget Sound and the Greater Salish Sea. Formed in partnership with Washington State in 1995 to protect these waters, WSMC has long stood at the intersection of maritime response and environmental protection, supporting safe commerce while safeguarding the coastlines we all depend on. Learn more at wismiccoop.org.